and welcome to another edition of the Adventure More webinar series. My name is Alex from the 10 Adventures team, and I'll be guiding you through this discussion where we talk about one of the best kind of walked trails, at least in my opinion, I think, in the world. A lot of people look to do this route. It's the Camino Portuguese, one of the better known variants as of right now of the Camino de Santiago. We have the pleasure of being joined by some more of our past guests who have done some 10 Adventures tours, which is always exciting because we love hearing about their experiences. So we have Geoff and Lala, who actually did the Central Camino Portuguese back in 2022 with us. So welcome, Geoff and Lala. And we also have Carol, who did the Coastal Camino Portuguese in 2022 with her daughter, Karen. So welcome, Carol. So looking towards the agenda for the webinar, we're just going to kind of take a look at the Camino Portuguese, just kind of what is the Camino in general, what makes the Camino Portuguese route so popular, and what are the main Portuguese routes, because there are a couple smaller variants as well, but there are two main ones, which I just mentioned our guests were a part of just last year, or I guess 2 years ago now. Man, time flies. So looking at the Camino de Santiago, what is it exactly? I'm sure most of the people who are in this audience do have an idea of this route. It is very well known. It's depicted in the movie The Way. That's kind of where most people get their first taste of it, I think. But it's also been gaining a lot of steam over the past couple of years. It's really just this iconic walking route that takes you really from starting points all over Europe. The main ones are in Spain and Portugal, but really, France, England, Switzerland, even Germany. Like there are starting points for the Camino all over Europe, and they travel across the countryside in the way that historical pilgrims would have done, ending up in Santiago de Compostela, right at the cathedral there in the main square. The cathedral is the supposed resting place of the bones of the apostle St. James. So a lot of historical significance, a lot of religious significance as well, which is a reason why back in the medieval era and throughout time, pilgrims would have kind of moved along this trail. One unique thing about this trip, and I think what a lot of people kind of get a sense of satisfaction from doing it, is the fact that in order to call yourself a pilgrim, in order to be able to make your way along that entire trail, you have your credentials with you, and you need to get your pilgrim passport stamped along the route. So throughout this entire journey, there are points of interest. You go, you get it stamped. It's kind of like this way marking throughout the entire trip. And you get to keep it as a souvenir at the end. You get a special certificate at Compostela, which says, you are a pilgrim who completed the route. It's just kind of this nice process to go through, and it gives you a nice objective to work towards. And I think that's why a lot of people, even for non-religious reasons, like to gravitate towards the Camino. So just a really, really popular route, especially right now. There's a lot of different reasons why people walk it, whether it's, they just like the outdoors, they love history, the historical sites, the food. There are actual people who do the Camino for, gastronomy tours kind of thing. So there's a whole bunch of different things out there. What they kind of say is you need to find your Camino, and it means something different to everyone. It truly does. So looking at the Portuguese Caminos in particular and why they're popular, I'm sure that our guests can speak to it a little bit better than I can. But there's a little bit of a difference. Most of the main Camino routes, which I guess I can actually pull up on the next slide here on this map, there are actually over 281 Camino routes. So plenty of variety to kind of explore. A lot of those are very, very less known variants. These are some of the more popular ones. And you can just kind of see they spread all throughout the Spanish countryside and end up at Santiago de Compostela in the northwest in Galicia. So looking at the two Portuguese routes, which are just along the left side, we have the Portuguese Coastal and the Central route, both of which the full route starts in Lisbon and goes all the way to Santiago. There's a little bit of a variance there for the coastal route, where at Porto it kind of breaks off and follows a little bit of the coastal terrain. But for the most part, it actually follows a good portion of the same route. And the reason I think why a lot of people are drawn to this route, especially right now, is it's a lot of people who have done other Caminos. They've done Spanish Caminos. They've experienced kind of the culture, the food, and they want something a little bit different. Everything along the route is just slightly different from the Spanish kind of Caminos. And I'm sure that you all can attest to this. It's sort of, there's a blend of culture, especially right along the border, that's kind of a unique aspect of it as well. So it's just something different for a lot of people who've done Caminos. And I think, it's just another kind of variety that they can explore once they've, say, done, the Camino Frances, the Camino Finisterre, the Camino del Norte. There's so many different options, but it's a nice little difference for them. Taking a look at, your Caminos in particular, I mentioned, Carol, you did the Portuguese Coastal Way, and Geoff and Lala, you did the central Camino Portuguese. So just looking at these two maps, you can see a little bit of a difference. And maybe I'll kind of segment here, and maybe Carol, you can kind of talk about your experience along the Coastal Way a little bit. Our map here kind of shows beginning in Bayona and going all the way to Santiago de Compostela. If I recall correctly, I think you and Karen started in Vigo and made your way from there. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your experience on the Coastal Way.
Yes, well, as I said, we started off in Vigo, and all very, very excited. We got to Redondola, and the first thing we wanted was a beer. It was really hot, so we beetled on into town, found the closest pub, ordered two huge beers, and then we thought, okay, now Karen, find our hotel. So. And this is when Google, I don't know about you, Geoff and Lala, but Google Maps led us astray. After our beer, we were headed out of town again. And we thought, oh my goodness, Anyway, we got directed back to we found ourselves back to the pub where we were having our beers. And the hotel was just 50 meters away from the door. So that was our introduction to our walk. But then the rest of the walk was absolutely wonderful. We passed beautiful countryside, vine leaves everywhere, and people were growing their own grapes, and it was so pretty. Along the coast, you would see, cross bridges, and you would see the oyster farms, out there in the ocean, and it was just spectacular. And every day, my daughter is a foodie. Every day, the incentive was to get to our destination so we could have a nice lunch. Thank goodness the Spanish eat late, and we did. It turned out to be quite a gastronomical, adventure as well as, spiritual.
Absolutely, yeah. The food in Galicia in particular is just absolutely incredible. We did a webinar on kind of the last 100 kilometers of the Camino Frances last week, and I kind of made a quip that, for me, Galician food is probably almost better than Italian food, and I really do think it is. It is the seafood, everything is just absolutely incredible. Yes. It also sounds, Carol, like you had your priorities in order. That's the first thing I would do is go and get a beer immediately after walking. That would be top of my list, and figure the rest out afterwards. So it sounds like you had everything kind of nailed down to begin with.
We did because, you don't drink much sort of wine at night because you have to get up early in the next morning and be fit to go on our stroll. So we had a wonderful sort of lunch and in each town we found a special place.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get those kind of pilgrim meals as well, which is kind of nice. Very, very filling after a good day of walking.
Yes.
And for Geoff and Lala, for you guys, so the main kind of difference here for the Central Way is sort of that beginning portion of the trip. So if you look at the two maps here, it's essentially up until, you guys started in Tui, and it's up until Pontevedra. That's the point where the routes kind of converge. So maybe you could tell us about that initial portion, and then, speak a little bit about your experience along the Camino Portuguese.
Well, yeah, for starters, the wines are exquisite, so do drink the wine. We really love the wines there. And, the next morning did not stop us. But so we actually started in Vigo, just kind of seasoned there for a couple of days, took a cab down to Tui, was not, a long distance whatsoever. And I should start off by saying I had surprised Lala for her 50th birthday. She'd always been talking about wanting to do the Camino. And so about 2 or 3 months ahead, I said, hey, guess what? This is what we're going to do. And so we've been looking forward to it, planning, got backpacks, the whole 9 yards. And it was lovely. I think every little town, what you'll find as you're walking through the countryside and, vineyards and whatnot, and like every maybe 2 kilometers, there's another little town you walk into. And you're literally walking past people's homes and through the center of town, then out into the opening again, and then count on it again. And so it really broke up the walking every day. And the walking was not difficult. I mean, it was certainly, looking back, I would train for it. I did not train. By the end of the week, I was a little sore, but it was lovely. The biggest thing I would say is just the people. In normal everyday life, you're kind of intersecting people. Well, here, everyone's walking the same direction. And so you can kind of linger in conversations, speak through broken language barriers and get to know folks. And then when you get to where you're going, there they are. And you've got this sort of common experience. You became friends. We became friends with a lot of people from around the world.
Yeah, as you walk along throughout the length of the trip, you start running into the same folks.
Yes.
Even if they're not with your group, you start kind of having a camaraderie. So by the end of it, you walk into a cafe or wherever, and it's like, you have a little family already. And that was kind of my favorite. We did learn, my best advice is to never pass a cute cafe. You can always get coffee, a beer, whatever, but always stop and enjoy being in that little town. Because there are a lot, but sometimes you go a good stretch and you're like, oh, I wish I'd gotten that while I could.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't need to get there right away. Linger and enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah.
And looking through the photos or through the video that you guys sent over, I think there was quite a few cafes that you guys stopped in there. I saw some great photos of you guys just, happier than clams, having a drink, just sitting in a little cafe or a bar somewhere. So it looks like you definitely made the most of that part of the trip for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the way to do it. Absolutely. So first of all, I got to say, before I even get to this part, Carol, I think this is a fantastic photo. This to me embodies the Camino. I don't know. You look like you are in your element here. So,
yes.
Thank you for sending it over to me because it's fantastic. But I just kind of wanted to touch on this idea. There's so many Camino variants out there. And you mentioned a little bit of why you chose the Camino Portuguese, the coastal route. You mentioned you wanted to see some of that coastal scenery and everything. And I guess we kind of also touched on it with your experiences, but are there any specific reasons why you did choose the route that you chose?
Time. We were sort of slightly restricted to how long we could spend over in Europe. And my daughter and I had we'd been to Prague, Paris, London and all that. But the Camino walk was something that I had always wanted to do. It was on my bucket list of trips. You get me a bit. And it just the opportunity just presented itself. This was the right time. We were both free, available to go, and we had 5 days to do it in. We wanted to get in 100 kilometers, and we had never been to Porto before, so we flew into Porto, and that was the beginning of our trip. We just, as I said, we reached out to 10 adventures, and you put it all together before we could sort of. That's it. We're doing
Before
it.
You could say no, we got you hooked.
We could say no, yes. We booked our flights and everything worked. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you were able to check a few things off your bucket list there for sure.
Yes.
It's such a great route to do those last 100 kilometers. I know for a lot of people, they may have grand ideas of doing one of the full Caminos, but it's a hard thing to get away for 30, 40 days. And to be able to kind of take that last 100 kilometer chunk, get your Compostela, kind of have that sense of achievement, experience all those things along the route. It's such a nice, way to sort of wrap up the whole Camino experience in a time frame that's achievable for a lot of people. So I think that's something a lot of people resonate with for sure. And Geoff and Lala, what about you guys? Is there a specific reason you chose, say, the central route over the coastal? Was it, kind of a timing thing as well, or you just saw some things along the itinerary that you liked?
It was mostly timing because of my birthday. So I wanted to be on the Camino when I hit 50. And so we kind of used that to get, and it was timing of how long we could be away from obligations at home and work. So it was really all about that. But we looked at the pictures too, and the places where we would have options to stay at and all of that. We're like, ooh, ooh, we like that one. So that was part of it too.
Yeah. I'm kind of bougie with our vacations. I like to stay in nice places and do it right. And I mean, really, truly, I was so grateful every day to end up with them. Like, hey, there wasn't like a hotel that got switched out. This is legit much nicer than I thought it was going to be. And every accommodation was just different from the last. And we got a really cool taste. On her birthday, we actually stayed in this like old Spaniards farm. And there were like goats and dogs and all this stuff all around. It was super authentic. And, Lala was like, this is exactly what I wanted on my 50th. And there was a cook there that prepared a meal for us, just her and I out underneath the starlight. It was really, really wonderful.
It sounds like a dream for a lot of people, I think.
It was wonderful.
And it's worth noting too that Geoff and Lala, both you guys and Carol as well, both of you chose the deluxe kind of accommodation packages as well for the tour, which something that you just mentioned, Geoff, is you were hoping none of the accommodations would get switched out, and it's a reality for a lot of these really popular trips. Sometimes is that especially during high season, it can be extremely difficult to snap up these places, right? Like it's a scramble for all these people to try and grab these hotels. So the fact that you weren't didn't have anything swapped out last minute. I mean, I know you guys went in October, so a little bit later in the season, but yeah, fantastic that we were able to kind of deliver on that experience for you, and I'm glad you loved all the accommodations, because I'm sure it makes the end of the walking day a lot easier when you arrive at the hotel and it's exactly what you were hoping for.
Yeah, and you guys did a great job giving us written directions in case the phones weren't working or your Google Nav was going wonky. So that was always nice. When in doubt, we could go back to the old school paper and be like, okay, well, we go to this corner, turn right, boop, 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 and it was always right there. So that was nice to have that as well. We did meet some folks that we ran into who got the switcheroo several times during their trip, and we're like, really, that happens? So we never had to worry with that. Well,
I'm glad if Google Maps leading you astray was the only thing that kind of went wrong, then I guess we can call it a success, right?
Yeah, Google Maps was not very good to us. God, reroute, take this left, and rerouting. It was not. Did you find that as well? That your Google Maps was not?
A little bit on the trail. I want to clarify. Like, I felt like the trail is really well marked.
It was when you went into the city. I'm talking about when you're in the city.
Once you get into the city, sometimes it would be the addresses would be wonky. So we just get into our backpacks and pull out the old printed paper.
It was wild. It's like whoever put those little blue and yellow arrows, like they knew. In your mind's like, I haven't seen it. Oh, there's the arrow.
Yes.
Like, you're always on route.
Yes, the Camino was well marked and really, really easy to follow. It's when you got into the city to try and find your hotel when Google took over that it was a little...
And I think that's where a lot of people can kind of find themselves in trouble too, is over-reliance on technology is never a good thing. People have been walking this route for hundreds of years. I think you should be okay, right?
Yes.
But then also the other area where people get in trouble is following other pilgrims. So if you get too zoned in on following people, and their hotel might not be anywhere near yours, they could be 5 kilometers. We've had people who've said, we got lost and we had to backtrack for about 10 kilometers because we just kept following people, which is exactly the situation you don't want to be in either, because then you're doubling your daily distance or whatever it may be. Wow. So that's another kind of area where it's can be a little spotty for sure. Right. So culture on the trail. This is something I haven't walked the Portuguese way myself. So for me, this is something that I haven't experienced. So I'm hoping that you folks can kind of speak a little bit on it. But the route kind of crosses the border from Portugal into Spain. And I know that each of your trips started after the Spanish border, but you're still in that area where it's right along it's kind of right along that kind of cultural barrier. Did you find any differences in the culture as you progressed closer to Santiago? Did it become considerably more Spanish? Was it kind of more or less the same little bit of blend throughout? How did you find it? Maybe we'll start with Geoff first.
It really depended on the topography, I felt like. When we went through, goodness, I'm forgetting the name of the city, that was along the coast, you could tell there's a lot more fishing economy than agricultural economy. And then when we got up into the plains, that would change. But everything was, really modest. homes were very tidy. People were very proud of their homes. It wasn't like you came back to America like, God, we live pretty horribly. Everything was really very beautiful. We loved how along the route people would have beautiful floral like gardens at the front of their house in a way of just kind of giving us something pretty to look at. Lots of dogs hanging out, watching us walk by. It's a really beautiful route.
It really is. The scenery is incredible. I did a portion further up along the coast, so up in the very northwest corner, the Finisterre to Muxia section. And that's one thing I noticed as well is, the scenery is beautiful, but also the people are. And I don't mean that in a looks way. I mean in their hospitality and their kind of traditions and everything, what they kind of uphold as a community. You can really tell it's just a very unique part of the world. And I think it really shines through, like you said, in their homes and in kind of how they react to pilgrims coming through as well, because it is part of their economy and it's something that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it is something that really does shine through.
I would add this relative to the passport. Anywhere you stop is going to have a stamp.
Yeah.
You just decide from what places you want to have a stamp in your book. And these small little churches and these small tiny communities, the door's open, it's unlocked, you walk in. If someone's not there, you can just grab the stamp your book. You'll fill up that book pretty quickly with stamps.
Yeah, they're pretty hard to miss, I guess, right? And Carol, how about yourself walking along, I guess, that coastal part, because you took definitely a more coastal terrain kind of aspect at the beginning of the walk. How did you find, did it shift at all once those kind of paths merged at Pontevedra and continued on towards Santiago? Did you find there was a cultural shift there, or was it more or less kind of the same as what Geoff described?
More or less the same. They are so welcoming and so warm. You're there in your gear and you're walking along, and they sort of buen camino, everybody, the locals as well as your fellow travelers. It was just a very welcoming experience all along the way. It was so nice. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we weren't, because we were two women, sort of on our own, and on certain stretches, at that time of year, we were on our own until we caught up with others, and we just felt perfectly safe, perfectly, at ease with the whole experience.
Absolutely,
it was really nice.
It sounds like it, and I guess it's kind of a sidebar question, but did either of any of you find that the route was, I don't know, no, I don't want to say less populated, but did you find it extremely busy? Because the last section, the last 100 kilometers of the Camino Frances is the busiest stretch of any of the Caminos. And I had a conversation with a gentleman who had walked it, and he made the joke that he actually wasn't tired from the walking itself. He was tired from the amount of times he had to say Buen Camino, because it was every 2 seconds there were so many pilgrims that he just got exhausted from saying it. So how did you find like the foot traffic along that section of the Camino Portuguese?
We didn't run into too many big, it seemed like people would clump every now and then. And then you could sort of be like, okay, enjoy the clump or hang back or speed up, depending on how you were feeling. Yeah. But we rarely felt like, oh, there's too many folks. Mm-hmm. But like Geoff said too, you're literally going with the flow most of the times. And so it makes just kind of meandering through really easy and smooth. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's nice that you're able to kind of find your own way around that instead of, it's almost like a marathon herd mentality of people walking. You kind of figure out, okay, we got to leave at this time or this time. We can kind of figure out if, today maybe we don't want to talk to as many people, so we'll kind of hold back a little bit. It's nice that you can kind of figure out what works for you, I suppose, right? So continuing on here, and we sort of just touched on this, at least in Geoff's experience, it sounds like, you can get your pilgrim passport stamped anywhere, absolutely anywhere. But it is an important part of the journey. You have your credencial del peregrino, which is your pilgrim passport, and you need it to get it stamped each day in order to receive the Compostela at the end. My question was going to be, how difficult did you find it? But it sounds like it wasn't at all. Carol, maybe, I don't know, if your stretch was a little bit different. Were there any towns or villages where you found like, it's a little bit of a struggle to get this thing done?
No, no, no. We had no problems whatsoever. I think we may have had a little hiccup in Vigo because we walked up to the church and it was closed. And but we eventually got a stamp because Vigo was our first time, right? And our first stamp, so we were a little bit anxious about that. But other than that, no, it was really easy. As you say, you could walk into a church and there, if no one was there, the stamp was there, so you could do it yourself. But
Just
yeah,
nice little self-service. Yeah, that's
yeah,
not too bad then, as long as there's a solid
no,
backup plan.
yes, yes, yeah, it was good.
We actually, for Christmas, one of the gifts I gave Lala was a big shadow box.
Ah,
And I have her passport stretched
Oh
out.
wow,
Because by the way, you get them in their pocket size, but they'll stretch out accordion out. It's about that long. It's just covered in
ah.
stamps. So you can remember your trip that way.
that's awesome. And I would love to see a photo of that if afterwards, if you don't mind sending it to me, because that sounds like it's actually a really cool visual. So that'd be really
I
great.
was just thinking we should have had it down here.
Yeah,
But
it has her shell and a couple other things in it.
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like a really great souvenir.
it is.
So Lala, this one's directed towards you. You mentioned earlier that this was a trip for your 50th birthday, a surprise trip. What was it like to undertake such a special experience with your partner? Because obviously, like that's a big life event. So how was it being on the Camino for something like that?
It was perfect. Like, what better way to go into your second act with but a big adventure that included physical activity, time for reflection, time together, kind of away from all of the noise, figuratively and literally, of everyday life. And we've had some amazing trips. I always let this one plan trips because he picks nice places. But it was my favorite trip we've ever done because our goal was to walk, to go from A to B. There's no pressure. There's no gotta see this, gotta meet the bus here, gotta hit our reservation. It was just, let's get up and walk and be kind to people and, just be interested and curious about what we're seeing. And it was the perfect trip, and it was the perfect way to set my next stage of life.
It really sounds like, I don't know, all of the different things that you just mentioned, the main kind of pillar of them is, I guess, just being present, right? And there's no, crazy, I mean, the itinerary can be crazy to some people, but it's not a crazy itinerary. There's things that you definitely do along the route, but it's not like, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. It's more of a time to kind of reflect on yourself, reflect on your relationships, whatever it may be. The outside world, you kind of just disconnect from it and you're just kind of present in that moment. It sounds like you really had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
That's the best part. I think it's just being there.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of, other kind of special events on the Camino, Carol, you had the opportunity to walk the Camino with your daughter, Karen, which to me, that sounds like a really great time to just kind of, again, remove yourself from the outside world and spend quality time together connecting. What was that kind of experience like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. To bond. We do have a strong bond, but this was just an even better way of doing it. We had, as you say, no distractions. It was two of us walking along the trails with no other thought overcrowding our mind. To be able to do this with Karen, because I'm a little bit older than 50. It was
No.
very it was very special. We and we've done several trips before. But this was just really special, a special bond for both of us, really. Karen has two older children, and I have her, and I've got grandchildren, and to get away from all that was just very, very special.
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like an incredible experience.
Oh,
Just getting to spend that time. I looked through the photos that you sent over, and like, it's the same as with Geoff and Lala. You guys you look so happy throughout the entire trip. You look like you were having a great time. And I think there's something really to be said for removing yourself from kind of the day-to-day life. You're putting yourself in not only a new place, but new situations as well. And I think that that's always a really interesting way to grow, because you learn a lot about people when you're in those kind of scenarios. It's just so different from everyday life.
and everybody on the walk is like vibing the exact same way. Like you turn to somebody like, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? And they're like, oh my gosh, this is the best. We're about to start talking. Like everybody's in the same mindset.
It's one thing to go on any other kind of trip, I think. And, people always talk about, like-minded individuals. I feel like the Camino really is one of those. It's everyone is in the same mind. Nobody does it who's in like an angry state of mind or anything like that. People are just, they're there for the moment. And you can really tell that with everyone's personalities, how they're interacting with everyone. It's such a special experience for sure. Which leads perfectly, I think, into the next question as well. Geoff, you mentioned to me prior to this webinar that you feel like you're responsible for about 50 other Caminos, and you've shared some of those experiences you've had, talking with other people. What in your mind makes it such a special adventure and something that even for people who haven't done it yet, that you can bond over it to the point where they go out and they decide to go do it?
Wow, that's a great question. It's not the typical trip to Europe. Most people go to Rome, go to Paris, go, the big ones. And this one's off the beaten path. I mean, it's unique that way. And for those of our friends or, people that know Lala and I, when they're like, so what was it like? It's like, get ready. Like, we're about to just give you the full view. And when they're done, like authentically, that sounds like the coolest trip ever. And so like, at our church, where Lala is super involved, they've never done it before as a group, and now there's a group going over based on her recommendation and just the stories we told, the people we met. It's hard to put into a paragraph or two, but you just find yourself like, for me, I was doing it for her. I wanted her to have this experience, and it was like day 2, day 3. It wasn't like end of trip. Early in the trip, I was like, whoo, this is good for me too.
It does kind of have the power to change you and I don't know, just sort of shift your outlook on things. It's like you just said, you planned it for somebody else, and then at a certain point, I don't know whether you're reflecting or what it is, but it just kind of turns into your own experience. And I think that's something that's really special as well, is the fact that these people can. Again, the fact that you're able, I don't even want to say persuade, because it's not like you're trying to get people to go on the Camino, but just through speaking about your experience and talking about this awesome trip that you had, it is in this tucked away corner of Europe that not many people go to. Although it is a well-known trail now, it's almost the land that time forgot, kind of. And I think because of that, it's really underrated and people are really blown away by just such an incredible experience that it is. So it sounds like even though you were the one who planned it, it kind of snuck up on you and became your adventure as well.
Absolutely.
I do want to touch on when you said the time forgot. There was moments along the trail where I became really aware of time and felt honestly, there were times I was looking for fairies in the moss and you're walking on 2,000-year-old stones and the moss and the trees. You can feel that, like in our country especially, we're so young. Yeah. And there you feel the history and the spirits, and I'm going to get hippy-dippy, but all of the magic of all of that energy that has flowed down that trail. It's palpable.
Absolutely. And it's not just human history, it's like the natural history of it as well. Like you kind of mentioned, there's like this feeling as you're going through. It's such an interesting landscape. The rest of Spain is, a lot of it's kind of arid and dry, and you go into this corner and it just gets so much rain that everything is this lush green color. And because of that, there's kind of the agricultural element, and it's just shaped their culture, whether it's from the sea to the agriculture to, the kind of mountainous, rugged terrain. It's just this weird place where, I don't know, it just doesn't draw a lot of attention because if it's, historically maybe it was hard to get to, but it's just, it has this real land that time forgot feel to it. And it's such a special part of the world, I think. If we're going to talk about time, I guess this is another song. I'm getting some really good lead-ins here, so this is awesome. But if you were to turn back the clock to the beginning of your adventure on the Camino, what's one thing that you probably would have done differently? I know that you had mentioned both of your groups have mentioned that the planning aspect was really easy. We kind of took care of it and everything just kind of fell into place. But was there anything that you would have changed about the Camino looking back on it now? And I guess we'll start with Lala.
No.
No? That's an easy answer.
No, I mean, really, everything, it is what it's supposed to be for you. And, you know, I would have loved to have been able to have gone for a longer period of time. But again, maybe that wasn't the way maybe the next time should be the longer.
There's always another one.
So I wouldn't change a thing because it was such a great memory that, you know, changing something might have made it different. And I liked it the way it was.
That's perfect. And Geoff, how about yourself?
I would have taken training a little bit more seriously. I was like, walking, how hard can that be? And I am pretty office bound in my normal life, and whereas Lala hikes pretty consistently. And it wasn't bad, but there were, like towards the end of the trip, I had some muscles I didn't know that I had that were letting me know who they were. I was like, ooh, okay, that's a little tender. But it's doable. But I would say that would have probably added to my enjoyment a little bit if I had just gotten my legs in shape.
And I think that's a common thing for a lot of people is that you see the word, especially, I mean, the way everyone kind of promotes it, it's a walking route. And in your mind, you think, it can't be that hard. It's a walk. I walk all the time. There's a little bit of rugged terrain in there, and it's not necessarily, you know, 1 or 2 days. It's the fact that you're doing 8, 9, 10 days, however long you decide to go on the Camino. And it kind of stacks up over time, right? And it sneaks up on you for sure. So although you maybe find the beginning, towards the end, there's a couple blisters, like you mentioned, I didn't even know I had this muscle. So it's kind of, it definitely sneaks up on you. Carol, how about yourself? Is there anything that you would have done differently if you were to turn back and do the Camino again for the first time?
If I could turn back time, no. I thought everything went really well. There's not a thing I would have changed. I didn't expect to find the food, the gastronomy to be so wonderful. I think I trained. I didn't specifically train for it, but I walk a golf course a lot, and we're ups and downs and all arounds, and we had the right gear. You know, I think it was so. You know, I think if you didn't have the right gear, you might have had a problem. But we had great. You know, we sometimes used our poles, sometimes not. The shoes were right. You know, as long as you're prepared, there's not a thing I would change.
I was going to say that seems to be kind of the main tenet between both of your answers is being prepared. As long as you're prepared, everything will be fine.
Yes. And yes, I had a blister, but blister plaster, put it on and not a problem. Didn't hurt at all. Just keep on going. And happily so. So.
It's all part of the journey, right?
Yes.
We saw this one guy from, was it Germany? Young guy. He was on holiday. We talked to him several times over the trip, but towards the end, he was just so chafed.
Oh, yeah.
And he was doing it like with the hostels, and he had all of his stuff on his back. So very different trip for doing that. But towards the end, he was like, "Oh yeah." His legs were hurting.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And that's kind of one of those things too, where a lot of people, especially a lot of younger people, get the idea that, you know, doing it on a budget or doing it kind of in that more roughing it backpacking style, which you can certainly do by all means. There's a lot of people that do, but I think that'll catch up to you a lot quicker than if, you know, you got a decent hotel and, you know, you got the right gear and everything. I think you're right. You definitely want to be prepared for it for sure.
Yeah.
So turning to kind of the lighter side a little bit, were there any kind of funny moments? Carol, you mentioned that, you know, you got lost and your hotel was literally right next to the bar in the first stage. Any funny or special moments that you guys can kind of recount and just, you know, think back on and go, that's something I'll remember forever? And I guess we'll start with you, Carol.
Well, specifically funny moments, that was the funniest. That was absolutely nuts, actually. But then along the way, you know, we didn't hook up, but we met a group of 4 sisters from Germany. They were doing the Camino, and they were FaceTiming their mum along the way. And we also met another young couple that these two groups were foodies because whenever we were sometimes, took each of us turns in getting to the restaurant first. So we would think, oh, what are you doing here? And I felt that was funny, but we sort of we were all had our that was a funny moment on the Camino. But other than that, the whole thing was fun.
Absolutely.
Nothing specific. It's how did you get here before us? To this particular restaurant that we were in. Where was that? In Padron. Karen's just come in, so yeah, in Padron. We were in town, and did you walk all the way? It was
taking a cab and skipping around the one side of the trail.
Yeah, hello, but that's all. Yeah.
I think that's something a lot of people speak about because you do keep running into the same characters, and I feel like that happens on a lot of different types of holidays, where especially like cruise ships or something, you're in there and you're in more of a confined space, and all of a sudden you just start seeing the same people, and you start catching on their behaviors, and then it's like you get to know them a little bit, and they all have these kind of quirky aspects to them. And I feel like the Camino is something unique like that as well, because you're all headed in the same direction, and it's inevitable that you're going to bounce into these people at some point again, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Geoff and Lala, how about yourselves? I'm sure that, traveling together on the trail, you have a bunch of funny stories. There's got to be one. I looked at your photos. It looks like you met a lot of great people and had some great meals and drinks and all this kind of stuff. What's something that kind of stands out to you guys?
Well, I will say, again, running into the same people. There was two gentlemen particularly that we kept seeing in restaurants and along the way. And then on the last day, Geoff and I were hiking separately for a little bit, and I ran into them, and we hiked and then met up with Geoff at the hotel, and it was our last night. And so they're Spanish, and so they invited us to join them, and they were like, we know of this place, we'll order all the food. We're like, great, we're in. And I was cracking up getting ready to go to dinner because their names were Eduardo and Jesus, and I'm like, babe, our last night of our pilgrimage, we're having our last supper with Jesus.
There's nothing more fitting than that.
You can't make that up.
Yeah. And what's cool is like Eduardo knew no English, so Jesus would translate for him. But it turns out we're huge Formula One fans. We still WhatsApp one another during the season and pull for the same drivers and stuff, and just had a blast with these guys.
Absolutely. It's all those connections that you kind of make along the trail. And out of that one funny moment, realizing that you're walking with Jesus, I guess you can go as far to say that. I don't know. But yeah, you form these connections with these people that you've never met. And it's something that you continue long after the fact. So that's a really special thing. And I think a lot of people go through that exact same experience. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jesus has done it. He does it every year. So a lot of people actually have had that exact same experience.
You're not the only ones who've walked with Jesus. There's a whole bunch. Any advice for first timers? This is maybe this kind of ties in a little bit as well with if there's anything you do differently, but looking back now, you've completed the Camino, you've gone through the entire experience. Anything you would tell somebody who's just about to set out? Maybe they're on the fence about it and they're just deciding. It's like, oh, I don't know if I'm cut out for it or not. Geoff, is there anything that you think you would definitely tell a first timer who's thinking about doing a Camino?
Yeah. Slow down. Slow down. It's not about getting to your hotel and checking off the miles. Like really savor it, and talk with people, and as Lala says, stop at the cafes, and really just enjoy the meanderingness of it. You don't have to do it all, in the morning and get there by lunch. Stretch it out. And, I'm looking forward to doing it again and stretching it out even further.
I think that's such a modern thing for us too, is it's always go. It's, you have to put a time limit on something, or, there's always a crunch. And I think you're right. Just taking a step back and going I got all the time. Well, not necessarily all the time in the world, because you might have a hotel you got to get to for a reservation or something. But, taking a step back and going, I can take my time with this. I can be present here. I can fully experience this and be in the moment. I think that's great advice for somebody. Lala, how about yourself?
I would say to be sure to take care of your feet.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Have good broken-in shoes, extra pair of socks in your backpack if you want to change. And then never let your water go under a third full.
Those are great, really practical ones.
Just practical.
The footwear one is really important because a lot of people, again, going back to the fact that it's called a walk, I think a lot of people underestimate just how hard it can be on your feet. And I can't remember what, there's a photo of, there was a woman who walked it in high heels, I think. And I can only imagine how destroyed your feet would be after spending one day, let alone 7, 8, 9 on a trail like that. It's, I hope she's doing okay now, because all I got to say is that would be real rough. Carol, how about yourself? Any advice for a first timer on the Camino?
Well, I think you've said it all. The main thing is to have the right equipment. The footwear is really, really important. So we were prepared for both wet weather. We had tivas, special hiking tivas, and hiking shoes, and just be prepared. Be reasonably fit to walk it, but don't be afraid. You don't have to be. You don't have to be super person to walk this. It's a lovely, just think of it as a lovely stroll along the countryside. And when you get to your destination of Santiago and you see the cathedral there, it just makes your heart burst with happiness and blessed, and you feel very blessed to have had this experience.
Absolutely. That square is stunning. Like walking up and the moment you get there and you see all the other pilgrims with you, like everyone's got their packs on and they're just finally getting that moment of rest. You look up and it's just this towering, imposing cathedral. It's a beautiful sight. But, it's something else that I wanted to touch on that you just said is that you don't need to be super fit for this. Like by all means, yes, be prepared and have the right equipment and maybe do, like Geoff said, do a little bit of walking beforehand, just to kind of make sure you're fighting fit, so to say. But you don't need to be like, a mountain climber or something to do this route. It is attainable for a lot of people. So if you are on the fence, like you can do it. It's definitely within your reach for sure.
We saw a lot of older people on the walk. Mm-hmm. Like it was surprising. I thought, okay, we were probably the younger people that we interacted with.
Absolutely. I think.
Would you say?
Yeah.
I think we had somebody who was, I want to say 88 who walked it. And like, I think she did a longer one too, like a little bit longer, 10 or 12 days or something. Like good on you. Like that's an achievement. And I think there's a lot of people, it is such a good attainable trip, a long distance walk that's like, it doesn't matter your age, it really doesn't matter your fitness. There's people, believe it or not, who go the real hardcore pilgrim route and they do it, they crawl on their hands and knees and crawl the entire way. It just goes to show there's again, there's a Camino for everyone and it's a different journey. For sure.
Yeah, we saw some pilgrims, in the square, sort of crawling to the entrance of the cathedral. That was very touching.
Absolutely, it's just such a spiritual experience for a lot of people. For sure,
it was a spiritual. Yeah, it is a spiritual experience.
Absolutely. In terms of future plans, so whether this is Camino related or not. Do any of you have any future travel plans on the horizon right now at the moment where you're like, this is the next thing up on my bucket list? Doesn't have to be a Camino, but if it is, all the better. Carol, how about you? We'll start with you. Any future travel plans that are kind of right now?
Well, yes, we are doing a cruise with the entire family. There's 10 of us from us till a 16-month-old baby. No, we're looking at Asia. We're thinking about Asia in the fall. And I was sort of looking at what you have to offer.
Well, if you need any help, by all means, shoot a message and we'll start planning that Asia trip for you because there's so many amazing destinations. A lot of the big popular ones right now are
Cambodia.
Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So those are really taking off. Absolutely. So yeah, if you have any questions, by all means, shoot me a message and we can start talking about it for sure.
Okay.
Geoff and Lala, how about you guys? Any travel plans on the horizon?
We don't know yet. We just did a big European trip this past year.
Nice.
I'd love to go back hiking again. We're looking at Scotland to hike sort of the Highlands of Scotland, and candidly doing another Camino, but it being the North Way, just kind of mixing it up. But nothing on paper yet. We might end up being a beach trip this summer.
Nothing wrong with
Keep it
that.
simple.
Yeah, you got to intersperse those throughout. You know what I mean? You do a Camino, you do a little bit of relaxation, then you hit the Highlands. It's kind of, you got to alternate.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, Karen and I last fall, we did the Canal de Midi. We did it with Le Boat. Now that was very exciting as well.
You did the cycle, the boat and bike combination, or
yeah, we did get bikes on the boat, but we never had time to ride the bikes. We were busy with the boat and going through the locks. That kept us very busy. Just the two of us. So an entirely different trip. But we were reminiscing about the Camino when we were doing those locks.
Yeah, you got some extra time. You can kind of reflect and think on it, right?
Hey,
and look back on those
what's
experiences.
this? Yes.
Let's turn. I think there's one pre-submitted audience question. Sorry, it comes from David, who says, I guess you guys can't really answer this, but it says, any insights into cycling this route from Porto north would be great. We do offer a cycling variant of this trip. The self-guided one is 9 days, and then the guided is 8 days. So it does go from Porto, I believe it up until up until Tui, it's a different route, and then from Tui it's more or less kind of the same route as these walking routes, but you're doing it by bike. So there is the option to do that there. We're probably going to cover that at a later webinar, so I don't want to give too much away. But I'll drop a link to those tours in the chat here, so you can take a look if you want. And then also I can shoot you an email if we do decide to plan one of those cycling Caminos as well. In terms of, let's see, audience questions. From Laura, she says, if I wanted to spend 2 nights in one of the towns for a break, which one would you recommend? Okay, this is perfect because you all have been on the trail. So are there any places where if you were to think back and you were to say, okay, I want to take a little bit of a rest day and spend 2 nights, where would you say would be the best kind of places? We'll start with Carol. How about yourself?
Oh, if we had 2 nights to spend, I don't know. Padron? Would you spend? Karen, would you spend 2 nights in Padron?
Yeah, phone a friend. Karen.
Yeah, phone a friend. Karen, she just walked in with it. Yeah, it's a little bit more of a town, but maybe I don't know.
What was the one that we stayed? The Pontevedra? Was that?
Pontevedra?
I would say like hotels, like we stayed in the Palace hotels a couple of times. And I was saying, like, next time we just look at where those hotels are, because they were like kind of the nicest hotels with like a spa or something and more restaurants. So
maybe
that's how we would choose where to stay longer, or wherever those like really nice palace hotels. It's like a Ritz-Carlton sort of chain.
Yeah.
So you're saying you would kind of base it more off the accommodations just because you have a day of walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think those hotels are in towns that have more restaurants and shopping and a spa and all that as well.
They were so centrally located. We'd walk out and there's like 50 restaurant options, and there was great nightlife, and even like 11 o'clock at night, like people are still out having a nice time. It's like, we got to go to bed. We got to get up and go hiking tomorrow.
Those priorities is you got to keep your mind on the Camino, right?
Yeah.
As a tangent, did anybody, you mentioned Padron, did anybody eat the Padron peppers? And if so, did anybody get one of the spicy ones? Because I can't remember what the number is, but they're supposed to be, is it 1 in 100 or whatever it is supposed to be super, super spicy. I never got to eat one. Everyone else at the table seemed to, and I never got a hot one. But how about you guys?
Yeah.
No, we didn't get a hot one.
They were delicious. I was surprised. This big plate of, and we ordered a ton of food. The octopus, by the way, got to have octopus. So good, but the peppers were really good.
We have one other question here. Oh, we got a couple questions here. Would you recommend extra days in Santiago? If so, how many? So yeah, so you get to Santiago de Compostela, you finish, you kind of have that weight lifted off your shoulders of finishing the route. Is it worth kind of spending a few days there? Is there a lot to explore and do?
We wish we'd added one more night there because we wanted to go out to Finisterre. I think it's how it's pronounced. We had to catch the train to head back to catch our flight out of Madrid the next day. Never made it out to the coast. Yeah. One more night in Santiago would have been perfect.
Just to give a little bit of a buffer. Carol, how about yourself? Do you think you would have given a couple extra nights or something at the end?
Actually, by the time we got to Santiago, we were ready for some retail therapy in Madrid. Don't forget, I was traveling with my daughter. We're mother and daughter. So, no, it was lovely, but we had done what we wanted to do.
Absolutely,
and we had seen enough of Santiago.
Santiago is a beautiful city. If you're looking to go shopping, I think there's only so much you can do. The central downtown, the historical center it's really nice and tight and small, and there's so many little corridors to go down. But I mean, honestly, you can probably blow through it in like an hour if you were really moving through there. But there are a lot of cool things to see. But if you're shopping, probably not the place for you. And last question here. For a trip next October, how early would you recommend booking? This is from Dave. I think it's kind of an interesting one because October you're already starting in the off season, so it's not peak busy season. Geoff and Lala, you guys actually booked for October, and I remember I think Geoff, you had reached out. Was it the end of August? I think, and we were able to pull everything together with all those deluxe accommodations. So it was a pretty short time frame. It wasn't too.
It wasn't bad at all, and there again, you guys just made it so easy. There were a couple others I was looking at, but everything was just in lockstep and clear, and the responses didn't leave me searching for more information. And I researched things ad nauseum before I pulled the trigger. I'm like, this looks really legit. I'm just going to do this one. So yeah, it was easy.
Perfect. So yeah, so it's Dave. You don't need to do it too far in advance if you're looking at October. If you were looking at like June, July, August, you're definitely going to want to do it, a few months in advance just to kind of give a buffer because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of those hotels do sell out. So it's kind of a matter of the accommodations and the logistics at that point. So October, you should be all right doing it, just a handful of months before. And with that, that's all the questions that we have. So I wanted to thank all three of you for joining me today for this. It's been awesome hearing about your experiences. It sounds like each and every one of you, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I looked at your photos. They were fantastic. It's, you're all grinning ear to ear and it looks like you just had such an awesome trip. So thank you for being here to share those experiences with a future generation of Camino pilgrims, because I'm sure they'll appreciate all the insights and all the knowledge that you shared today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for letting us relive it.
Yes.
This has been fun for us too.
Yes. To relive it, to rethink about it. Yeah. To really appreciate what we did.
The only thing left is to relive it on the trail again, Carol. So you can do that.
Yeah. Okay.
There's always another Camino. But with that, I'll say thank you for everyone who's in the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll also drop our company email and my personal email as well. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to shoot them down there. But we'll catch you on the next webinar. For now, just signing off. Take care.
Thank you. Nice meeting you both.
Bon Camino. Yeah, that's a good one to finish with.
Yes.